On this week's Gridiron Report, we have the Lions NFLPA report cards, the Pistons win again, some Tigers injuries, Michigan and Michigan State basketball updates, some college hockey updates, and a listener voicemail to wrap up. So let's get into it.
In the heart of the city where the lights grow dim, grit and grind every inch, every rim. From the underdogs rising to the legends that win. It's the Gridiron Report, let the games begin. Every highlight's a journey, roads paved with fire, sweat, tears, and hustle that never expire. From the rookies on the rise to the old hands retire, Gridiron is the place for fans to conspire. Hustle on blast, beats thundering loud. Champions are born from the roar of the crowd. The Gridiron Report, where the stories are proud.
Welcome to the Gridiron Report, your Lions First All Detroit Sports podcast. Today is Wednesday, March 5th. And before we get into anything, I want to just take a quick moment to thank all of our listeners out there. Kyle and I have both been traveling, honestly, for the last 3 to 4 weeks. So whether it was a delayed episode drop, less than ideal audio, anything in between, thank you all for your patience. Thank you for understanding and sticking with us. We should be good to go now for the next foreseeable future as we continue to drop these. So again, just wanted to give a quick thank you to all our listeners out there. But we do have a jam-packed show for you guys, touching on just about every Detroit sports team there is. So, we're a Lions podcast first. Let's just start right there with the Lions. And like I said, with the NFLPA that was just released this past week. If you don't know, the NFLPA is obviously the NFL Players Association. They release a survey that is sent out on a yearly basis to all the players across the league. They are asked a bunch of different questions based on the different franchises. They rank them in terms of A+ all the way down to, I believe it goes down to like a D or something. So real quick, let me just read off what the Detroit Lions had for their NFLPA results. I think there's 12 to 14 or something. So we have treatment of families. They come in at a B. Food and dining coming in at a B-. Nutritionist and dietitian, B. Locker room, C+. Training room, B+. Training staff, B. Weight room, B. Strength coach, A-. Team travel, B+. Head coach, A+. Ownership, B+. And that all comes together for an overall grade of B, which is exactly 14th in the NFL. So basically right in the middle of the pack. I know that's a lot of different letter grades and in different categories. But Kyle, anything jump out to you across all these different grades that the Lions got for this past season?
Yeah, for sure. I first and foremost, the things that don't that jump out to me that don't surprise me at all. I mean, head coach, A+. We love MCDC. I mean, we know he's a fantastic leader of men. I'm all in for him being aggressive, going forward on fourth down. I think that he really gets the most out of his players. And it's really just a testament to him as a head coach. So yeah, I can't say enough good things about him. Love that he's A+. Tied for first. That's pretty high. And I think it's warranted. So shout out Dan Campbell there. Ownership, B+. I think that their ownership has been phenomenal over the last couple of years. Sheila's been great. She's brought in some really good pieces, Brad Holmes being the GM. So I think they're just doing some really good things from an ownership perspective. So yeah, A+ there for head coach, B+ for ownership. Love it. Where I was maybe a bit surprised, but actually just thinking about it, just Ford Field is aging, and I think it was built in like 2002, 2003, somewhere around there. So we're going on 2 decades, and there's a lot of brand new stadiums or newer stadiums with newer facilities. So the locker room at a C+, 18th in the league, weight room at, a B, 22nd in the league. That doesn't really surprise me too much. I just feel like Ford Field, I mean, I haven't seen the facilities. Obviously, I'm just, sitting on my couch every Sunday, but it doesn't surprise me that the facilities are probably older. They're probably aging. I don't know how much they invest in them. I'm sure they've probably updated them since 2002, but that doesn't surprise me a lot. What does surprise me, things like nutritionists, dietitians, 23rd in the league, food and dining, 19th. I mean, these are things that if you throw a little money at it and a little time at it, I feel like you could really improve that. So yeah, definitely 14th overall. I feel like the Lions can probably improve on that. If they want to be a top 5 team in the league, I do feel like they should be investing in things like their nutritionists, things like, food and dining for the players, treatment of families. Obviously, like we love the families, got to improve on that a little bit, but overall, yeah, not too bad.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised. I mean, 14, like you said, 14th overall, right in the middle of the pack. I feel like in over the last year or two, we've carried ourselves, like you just mentioned, as a top 5 team. We're Super Bowl contenders now, year in, year out. I feel like we need to do more to get higher up on the list. You mentioned the head coach. We're tied for first. I think the other one who was tied for first was Andy Reid. So obviously, real high, high praise there, and
Wow.
great company for Dan Campbell. I'm surprised there was no category for general manager. I know they do a bunch of these different surveys across different publications. I think The Athletic did something for hockey a few weeks ago, and one of them was best GMs to work with, as in trying to make a trade with, or make a deal or something. And that was a category so I'm kind of surprised there isn't a GM, general manager category in this. But I agree. I mean, there really is, in my opinion, no reason to not be better in terms of nutritionist, dietitian, treatment of family. That's just stuff that you have to get right. So, 14th overall, I think we could do better. I'd like to see them take this information, again, now that we carry ourselves as a top 5 team in the NFL, and just at least get in the top 10. I think that's should be bare minimum on a lot of these. They can start to do some minor updates and upgrades to Ford Field, like you said, as it's starting to age out. But I think they definitely need to start doing better with this. So that came out this year. It's just interesting. Everyone has different takes and stuff. It's honestly more fun to look at the different teams and different franchises that really struggle. I know the Miami Dolphins got C's and D's across the board. The Arizona Cardinals were horrendous, again, C's and D's across the board. So I think this stuff like this only does damage to teams rather than actual goodness to other franchises. But again, it's on them for not addressing these simple things and just putting some money in. These guys are making billions of dollars. They can put a little bit of money and effort into making that better. But so that was just a little bit of Lions news coming out. The other Detroit Lions stuff we have, obviously we are a Lions First podcast, so we had to find a little bit more stuff. It is, in a sense, that cap casualty time of year. You start to see guys that are kind of surprising to be open on the market, guys that, again, are cap casualties. Teams are having to cut them or release them in order to free up some money and to go into a different direction or something. So we have a few different guys that over the last day or so have been released. So let's just chat real quick to see, would you take them on the team? Obviously, you're going to have to pay them. So if you're paying guys like these, you're going to have less to give, the Hutchinsons who you're working on an extension for, the other guys on your team that you're working on these extensions for. So the first one, and that's Darius Slay from the Eagles. Big play Slay was released by Philadelphia. He is said on record pretty much that the only 2 teams he would want to play for is Philly or the Lions. Are you inviting big play Slay back to Detroit now that he's been cut by the Eagles?
Knee-jerk reaction is yes, just because I feel like, and I've watched a decent amount of Eagles games the last couple of years. I feel like he has a lot left in the tank. Looking at his stats this year, I don't know if he had a intercept. Actually, no, I don't think he had an interception this year. So
No.
maybe those stats are falling off a little bit. Not that interceptions are the end all be all for a corner, but He's definitely getting up there in age. I think at the time of recording, what is he, 30?
34.
Just turned 34 years old. So, yeah. So it's tough for me to just say bring him home. But I feel like you can get him on a pretty team friendly deal. He's 34 years old. At the very least, I think that he could add some really good depth. And be a presence as far as leadership is concerned for a lot of the young guys. I'm looking at Terry Arnold. Going into his second season, this is a very pivotal off season for Terrian. So I think that you probably could get him on a team-friendly deal. I'd be all in on big play Slay, and maybe we see a little bounce back.
I think the key there is exactly what you said, team-friendly deal. For some of these other guys we go into in a second, it's probably not going to be the case. But because Darius has a history here, again, he has said that really the only 2 teams he wants to play for are the Eagles or the Lions. I think you might be able to get him on that. I have his numbers in front of me. So, yeah, he just turned 34. His overall grade is on PFF 67.6, which is slightly above average. He's 69th out of 223 qualified cornerbacks, so slightly above average. His run defense was slightly below average, 122nd out of 223. His coverage grade was again slightly above average, 68.9. He had 44 solo tackles, no picks last year, no total pressures. Only had 32 receptions allowed last year, which was 74th out of 223. So he definitely has fallen off that aged ledge a little bit. But I agree with what you said. If you can get him here on a team-friendly deal, it just simply for the mentoring of cornerbacks. We talk about how cornerbacks need to have that dog mentality, that confidence. That's like, even if you're getting burned, you need to believe you're the best player out there in order to deal with these, 6'4", 6'5" receivers who are all-stars. You need to have that sort of mentality. And Darius Slay has always, in my opinion, had that, even going back to his time in Detroit. It's probably why he didn't get along with Matt Patricia so well. So you bring him in, he can, really help with, like you said, guys like Terry and Arnold. I think if you get him on a team-friendly deal, I wouldn't want him starting every game, but I think if you can get him on a team-friendly deal, I'd be okay with it. I wouldn't be too upset. The other guy, so we have 3 guys in our show notes here. The other guy that was just released by the Bengals was edge rusher Sam Hubbard. So Sam's a little bit of a more different case. Obviously, we just said Darius Slay has history here in Detroit. He's 34 years old. Somewhat fell off that edge a little bit. Sam Hubbard, 28 years old, right in the basically the middle of his prime, a position of need for Detroit. You bring in Sam Hubbard here to Detroit, he would obviously need and require a larger contract, but he is a guy who's had success in the past. He didn't have a super great year last year, but are you bringing him to Detroit?
I'm not exactly sure on Sam Hubbard. And admittedly, I probably don't know enough about this player. I feel like there's other edge rushers on Cincinnati that, are probably a lot more famous. Looking at you, Trey Hendrickson. But I mean, just looking at his stats last year, only 2 sacks, which is very down from his 2023 season with 6 sacks. And then he had, 6.5 sacks, 7.5 sacks the previous 2 seasons before that. So, I mean, you look at a guy who, I think he just turned 29 and he did have a down year too. So maybe that helps, like when you're looking at what you might have to pay him, knowing that he's not coming off like a 10 sack season or anything crazy like that. He kind of had a down year. So even though he wasn't really injured, he played 14 games, right? So maybe you could get him again, feel like a broken record, but on a team-friendly deal. I'm not really sure. I feel like defensive ends probably garner quite a bit more cash than a 34-year-old cornerback would. So yeah, I mean, I'm not exactly sold on Sam Hubbard. I think that maybe, and I have seen the Lions mocked at that 28 draft pick to take a defensive end or maybe a tackle, but I almost think that they should just invest that first round pick in a defensive end versus trying to get a 29-year-old edge rusher who kind of had a down season. But I don't know, Ty. What are you thinking? Are you all in on Sam Hubbard?
When he was first released by the Bengals, I saw it, I immediately, we've talked about it in the past. I'm an emotional, knee-jerk kind of sports fan. I was like, yeah, call him up right now, get him in Detroit. And then similar to you, I jumped into his numbers, and his pass rushing grade is far below average at 47.6. It's 202nd out of 211 qualified edge rushers. Overall grade is just below average at 58.9. Real kind of just middle of the pack. He does have a good run defense grade, but again, our rushing defense is already pretty good, and especially up the middle and on the edges, it's okay. But we're really looking for people to support the pass rush and get to the quarterback, which is just not exactly something he has done, and at least didn't do this past year. So I was all in on it until I started prepping for the show and looking into his numbers. And I think I agree with you. I'm out on it. I think him having a down year might help, like you said, might get him on a better contract. But if he can't get it done and have better numbers opposite Trey Hendrickson, like you mentioned, who else is he going to, that should be taking a lot of the pressure off of him and letting him eat against these quarterbacks. And it really hasn't been the case. So yeah, I think overall I'm half in on Darius, out on Sam Hubbard. And then our final guy just released, I believe today, Davante Adams, wide receiver of the New York Jets. A little bit of an up and down year, was up and down past few years, I guess, since him and Aaron Rodgers left the Packers. Davante went out to the Raiders. Didn't really work out there. He wanted to play with Derek Carr, his college QB. Derek Carr obviously ended up leaving the Raiders, so Davante Adams was forced to play with a number of different quarterbacks. Him and Aaron worked out the trade over to the Jets. They're releasing him in order to free up money, to try and figure out, some other positions of need. Davante Adams, again, 32 years old, 6'1", kind of that X receiver. Are you taking him in Detroit?
Yes, I am taking Tay on the Lions. I feel like, They could get him for decently cheap. I know we kind of had a chat about it with a couple of our buddies today, and some numbers were thrown around like 25 mil, whatever. And I think that they could get him for cheaper than that. I mean, he's 32, going on 33 years old. I think that a wide receiver of that age, like you're not going to get paid as like a top 10 receiver in the league, even though he is obviously. I think he does have a lot left in the tank. And, you look at his numbers, I don't really put a lot of stock in his numbers over the last couple of years just because he really hasn't had anyone throwing to him. I mean, you mentioned it, but Derek Carr and then a hodgepodge of Raiders quarterbacks who all sucked ass. And then, you had a 40-something-year-old Aaron Rodgers, so on one leg, essentially. So, yeah, I think you put him in Detroit with Jared Goff, and, he's popping off for 1,000 yards and probably 8 or 9 touchdowns. So, yeah, I'm just picturing him out wide when you have Amon-Ra St. Brown in the slot, and then, you still got J-Mo, of course. And I think, how are you stopping that team? I mean, it's insane.
I was on the fence. I was leaning towards being in on him, but you just convinced me wholeheartedly. I want Davante Adams here. The cap space just went up. We have money to spend. No one knows how the cap room works. The money just seems to continuously go up. We can find it if we can figure it out. Even if he doesn't have 100% left in the tank, because what we said he is 31 years old, 32 years old. He is so good. His hand-eye coordination in finding and high pointing balls is so good. Even if he can't go out and get 1,000 receiving yards, which he did have last season, he had 1,063, so he still has a little bit left in the tank. Even if he can't go out and do that and replicate that. Oh, yeah. You put him in the corner in the red zone, he's an absolute monster. He's a weapon. I'm literally just picturing you have like you just mentioned, Jameson Williams kind of doing the under stuff and breaking for a touchdown, or Amon-Ra St. Brown figuring his way out at the 20-yard line. Then you have Davante going a little bit deeper in the end zone. I mean, he had a 75.8 overall PFF grade, which is 30th out of 98 receivers, so slightly above average. I'm in on it. I think, like you said, get him a good receiver, or a good quarterback to throw to. He had 8 touchdowns last year, which was 12th out of 98 qualified receivers, with a number of different quarterbacks throwing to him, most of which are probably fighting for a starting position in the NFL next year. I'm in on it. I'm adding him. That does mean probably you take on Davante Adams. You lose Tim Patrick, who we are huge Tim Patrick fans. We love Timmy P on this podcast. Would hate to see him go, but you probably can't carry 2 X receivers, especially if you're paying Davante Adams. So sorry, Timmy P.
Sorry, Timmy P. We love you, man. But yeah, I mean, Brad Holmes, I feel like you got to work your magic if you're Brad Holmes. And again, this has to be at least a semi-team friendly deal. Like you're not throwing a bag at 32, 33-year-old Davante Adams. You got to be smart about this, but I think there is a way to be smart about it and still get him in that Honolulu blue, and I'm pretty fired up about it.
Okay, that's really all we have for the Lions. So we had the NFLPA surveys going out. The Lions basically coming middle of the pack. Got to up that a little bit. We had the cap casualties. Would we bring them to Detroit? Darius Slay, we're kind of both a half if the price is right. Sam Hubbard, I think we're kind of leaning that we're out. Davante Adams, give us Davante Adams in the Honolulu blue. All in on him. So let's move on to the the hottest team in the city of Detroit right now, and that's the Detroit Pistons. They are absolutely on fire. Again, since the new year, really, they have been a completely different team for a number of different reasons. I mean, we had to first start 2025, you had Cade Cunningham going absolutely off, really solidifying his position on the All-Star, during All-Star break and on the All-Star team. But really, over the last 3 to 4 weeks since then, we've seen Cade's numbers drop a little bit, still playing at basically an all-NBA level, but you're seeing the rest of this team really start to pick up the slack and support Cade, and which is fantastic because we started to see in a few different games, teams were starting to zero in on Cade, not letting him get up any shots, like just basically focusing all their attention onto him. And now to see the other guys, the Malik Beasleys, Jalen Duren, Isaiah Stewart, Tobias Harris stepping up and doing things that we brought all these guys here to do is fantastic. I mean, they're 9-1 in their last 10. They are 11th in offensive rating, 116.1. First in defensive rating at 109.1. Overall net rating, they are 4th in this win streak with +7. They are absolutely fantastic. We are no longer talking about this play-in position, trying to make the play-in game. That is firmly in the rearview mirror. We are trying to now basically get a home playoff series, which would absolutely blow the roof off of LCA.
It's so fucking sick. Part of my French. It's so awesome to see. I mean, what a transformation. And you mentioned that, yeah, there's players that are around Cade that are really stepping up. what I loved, you also mentioned it, the defensive rating, first in the league in, I think it was in the last 30 games. What a transformation just think about it, Ty. Last year, Monty Williams is your head coach. That team couldn't stop a fucking pick and roll, which is insane if you think about it. This is the highest level of basketball, and you can't stop a pick and roll, which you're taught to defend when you're in grade school. And it was so disgusting to see, and it's so amazing to see the transformation that's taken place this year, where the team is just selling out. They're playing awesome defense. I mean, Cade, I think in an interview after the Jazz game, or maybe a presser after the Jazz game, he was just talking about how the guys can play defense. Jalen Duren, he just has so much length, and he's a force down low, but he also has the length to guard the perimeter as well. Same with Beef Stew. You got Oscar Thompson, who's just freak athlete, and he's incredible at defense too, and he's been so awesome on offense as well. Just have one stat for you, Ty, and I guess I'll preface this. Bit of a cherry-picked stat, but Oscar Thompson against the Jazz, he actually became the youngest player in NBA history to have a stat line of 15 or more points, 5 or more boards, and 5 or more assists without missing a shot. And you know who else did it in the same game is Jalen Duren. They're the first duo to ever do it in a game. So, yeah, I mean, the guys are just selling out. They're playing awesome. It's really fun to watch. And don't look now, Tyler, but they are a half game out of the 4 seed in the Eastern Conference.
It's so fun to watch and so rewarding because you brought in all these guys. You brought in JB Bickerstaff, who is known to be a defensive-minded coach. You had guys that are coming in this year and trying to prove that they belong in this future, i.e. Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren, and both in their own way have proven they've done the things that they needed to do, taken the steps that they needed to prove that they're worthy to be a part of this future. Jalen Duren, what he needed to do this year, everyone needed to see him be at least serviceable on defense. He was fucking horrendous at defense last year. I mean, he was terrible. And coming into this year, he's obviously up for a contract extension after this year. Everyone is saying you got to be better at defense. You are such a liability at defense. You're 6'11", 20 years old. You got to be decent at defense. And the start of the year, he really honestly wasn't. He honestly was not being any better at defense, and it was really disheartening. It was really starting to think, like, is he not going to be a part of this future? Is there some sort of, can we gauge if there's a trade market out there for him? And all he's done in this past month and a half is flip that on its head and start playing phenomenal defense. And I wrote an article about this, I think last week, just talking about this transformation he's having. They asked him after a game, like, what is going on? Suddenly you're back to the old Jalen Duren of last year. That's a walking double-double, but you're also playing fantastic defense. And I don't remember the quote exactly, something along the lines of, like, I was just playing soft as shit. I looked in the mirror and decided I didn't want to be soft anymore, and that's what I'm doing, and it seems to be coming through. And that's just kind of the mentality this team is taking on. Everyone is playing their role so perfectly. Just give Malik Beasley the keys to the city. I mean, fucking hell, he is so fun to watch. I mean, that's the reason I was so upset that you got him in the draft last week. He is so fun to watch. They each have their own personalities, and it's coming through so perfectly. It's going to be a little bit difficult. We had a difficult stretch over the last week, playing the Celtics and the Nuggets. They did pretty well over this last week. They ended up crushing the Celtics, and I don't want to fucking hear anything about, Jaylen Brown didn't play, didn't really count. I don't fucking care. It's not our fault that a guy is hurt. We're going to beat who you put in front of us. And then they absolutely just crushed the Jazz last night, or 2 nights ago when this is being released. And that's what good teams do. Good teams beat up on the bad teams. So I'm so fired up. If we get a home playoff series or something downtown, you better believe I will take out a second mortgage on my house to go watch that game, to go watch multiple games. I am so fired up with them.
I'll be there. I'll fly in 100%, no matter what it takes, to see a playoff game, Pistons playoff game. That would be incredible. And yeah, just shout out to JB Bickerstaff, Eastern Conference Coach of the Month for the month of February. And in my opinion, he's my Coach of the Year. I mean, this turnaround, we talked about it last week. We talked about it in previous podcasts, but this is one of the greatest turnarounds that you've seen, just considering how dog shit the Pistons were last year, and the leap that they've been able to take this year. It's a huge part of it, if not the entire part of it, is JB Bickerstaff. I mean, obviously the players are getting better too. Big part of it's Cade, but coaching goes a long way, man. So just an incredible shout out to JB Bickerstaff. Yeah, like I said, Eastern Conference Coach of the Month for February, and in my opinion, he's coach of the year. So we'll see on that. But yeah, I mean, it's they got a tough game tonight. You mentioned there a couple games coming up. Tough game tonight at the Clippers. They just beat them last week, so it's kind of a revenge game there. Then a well-deserved couple of days off from the road trip before they actually host Golden State at home. Of course, another good team, and then also host the Trailblazers, who are like sneaky one of the hotter, if not one of the hottest teams in the NBA as well. After a pretty horrible start for them, so tough stretch of 3 games. But I like how the Pistons stack up against anyone, and that's crazy to say. We could not say that a year ago.
The Trailblazers are playing really well. Detroit's own Chauncey Billups, the Trailblazers head coach. I believe I saw something on Twitter. I have not confirmed this. Even if we lose out on this road stand that you just mentioned, Golden State and Trailblazers, I believe we're still pretty firmly in that 6th seed. So it doesn't necessarily hurt us against that, any sort of playoff percentages. But obviously it'll hurt us trying to get to that 4 seed and get a home playoff series. So, super important streak coming up. Hopefully they use those few days off to start recharging and gear up for this playoff push that we haven't had in 7-8 years. So it's awesome. We actually have a listener voicemail that has to do with both the Pistons and the Lions. So let's give that a listen right now.
Hi, this is John Picknick from Midland. Love what you two boys are cooking up here. With the Detroit sports renaissance, I've been debating which title would mean the most. So I wanted to ask, would you rather see a Pistons three-peat or the Lions and Sparty football bring it home? Thank you.
Oh, man. First and foremost, Johnny from Midland, thanks so much for the voicemail. I almost can't tell if you're from Midland, Michigan or Midland, Texas with that accent, man. But it's tremendous to hear. And really great question. I love a good hypothetical, a good would you rather. It's a tough one. I think that if I was choosing between a Lions Super Bowl or a Pistons three-peat, I think I probably would lean towards that Pistons three-peat just because – that's a dynasty that, you hardly see nowadays in the NBA. It's hard to win 3 in a row, but you throw in, you dangle the carrot and throw in, a Sparty national championship as well. Sorry, I didn't hear if that was in football or basketball. Of course, we're, approaching March Madness. I would cry tears of joy if Michigan State won another natty in basketball. But I think when you throw beloved Spartans with the Lions, I think it's a pretty easy one. I'm going with that, but if Michigan State sports weren't in it, I'm probably going Pistons just because that three-peat is it's real tough to do. But I don't know, Ty. What are you feeling from good old Johnny Picknick's hypothetical here?
Yeah, Johnny, thanks for the call and the voicemail. I agree with you in that throwing in Michigan State in there really tips the scales. I think if it's going to be that scenario, 100%, I think pretty much everyone's going to take the Super Bowl and Spartans, regardless of what sport. If it's basketball, hell yeah, 100%. We've talked, I think, on here before, if not, off pod, about how Tom Izzo needs one more championship in order to peacefully ride out into the sunset. Once he gets that last one, I think he can kind of wash his hands, go out as our hero, and never buy another beer in the state of Michigan, let alone the Midwest again. But then it can also really solidify him as a top, 5, 6 college basketball coach of all time. I'd have to break the numbers down a little bit more, but getting a second one for him really would allow him to move on peacefully. If it's football, it's a little bit different. It's a new scenario with Jonathan Smith there, and so it's a little bit different. But I think taking the college aspect out of it, just like you said, the 3 championships for the Pistons versus the Super Bowl, I agree. 3 championships for the Pistons. 3 in a row, it's a dynasty. It adds you're suddenly in that conversation for, top dynasties in the last 15 years and 20 years. If you're getting 3 in a row, you obviously have a fantastic core. That's very hard to do. It is doable in the NBA, but it's really hard to do in the NFL. A Super Bowl, obviously, the Chiefs were going for 3 in a row. It's really hard just to get to 2. It's super hard to get to 1. When we lost in the NFC Championship a few years ago, Dan Campbell made the famous quote of it's going to be so difficult, near impossible to get here again, and he wasn't joking. It's just so difficult in order to even get to the Super Bowl. So many different things had to line up. I'm going to go Super Bowl because of what it would mean to the city, because the Lions have been kicked for so long. I'm going to go Super Bowl on that one. But I can see the championship for the Pistons if you just do the 3 versus the 1. If you're doing 3 versus the 2, the Super Bowl and the Michigan State, you got it. The scale's got to be tipped in that way.
Yeah, I think for me, just like that elusive three-peat. I mean, you join the ranks of the Shaq and Kobe Lakers, and then of course like MJ did it twice, right? 2 different three-peats. So besides that, I mean, I don't know, maybe if you go back further in history, there's probably a few other teams that done it, but the modern era, the MJ era, LeBron era, whatever you want to call it, only a handful of teams have done it. So like if the Pistons were up there and Cade is front and center there, and maybe a Finals MVP or 2, I mean, I'm just like I'm salivating just thinking of it. So yeah, we should probably talk about something else, but
yeah, let's keep it moving. Again, Johnny Picnic, thank you for the call. If you guys want to join in the conversation, that call-in number is 313-306-7939. Give us a shout. Talk about sports. Talk about Detroit in general. Really anything you guys want us to chat about on the pod, we can listen to it, play it, react live. So let's keep it going, though. We have, again, a record number of different teams and different sports to touch on in today's episode. So let's keep it moving down to Lakeland, down in Florida. We have the Detroit Tigers. We mentioned last week they were starting their spring training. Catchers and pitchers were reporting last week or the week before. We had actual games starting up this week. Really, no one's needs to pay much attention to spring training. The one thing, actually I should say the 2 things really to pay attention to, though, are the injuries that are really starting to pile up, and we haven't even had opening day yet. So Matt Vierling, who we talked ad nauseum about Alex Bregman on this podcast. We all wanted him to be here. We don't need to lie anymore. We obviously all wanted him to be here. Then once we swung and missed on him, pun intended, we decided to, start talking ourselves into Matt Vierling being our opening day third baseman. He had I think 16 home runs last year, 257. I think he hit something like that. I mean, we were all talking ourselves into him. He has now gone down with a right rotator cuff injury, has been officially ruled out for opening day, which really sucks. I mean, again, we missed out on the golden opportunity. And then it also was released that some of the other free agents that we were sort of targeting, sort of not targeting, actively kind of started to avoid us because it was so obvious that we put all of our attention on Alex Bregman. So it's kind of the triple kick while we're down. We lost Bregman. We didn't get the other free agents because we were focusing so much attention on Bregman, and now our backup that we have all talked ourselves into, Matt Vierling, is out for opening day. So it is just a strained right rotator cuff, but still, obviously less than ideal. The other injury that we saw and happened kind of in a routine play, just a pop fly out down there in spring training, was Parker Meadows. Parker, part of this young core that was just brought up last year. He is gone down with a nerve injury in his right forearm, which is really unique and a little bit different than the rotator cuff. I think the rotator cuff is at least a little bit documented. You kind of know that's why Matt Vierling's already been ruled out for opening day. You kind of know what to expect with that one. With Parker Meadow and his nerve issue in his arm, it's actually, there's no answer to it. There's no timetable to it. His arm, what it was, is kind of a painful thing to happen to him, and then his arm just went numb, and he's actually just waiting for that nerve to wake up. And the strange and unfortunate part about that is that it literally could wake up next week. It could not wake up for the next 6 weeks. So he's not been ruled out for opening day yet, but it's trending that way. It's a lot of cloudiness regarding that. Really unfortunate. Parker, again, is part of the young core that we brought up. He's a Gold Glove outfielder contender. If you watched any of his plays last year, he kept us in a number of different games once we brought him up based on his defending in the outfield. He's electric. I think he's like 6'5" or something, so he can cover so much ground. And his bat wasn't too bad either. He's really coming along. He's going to be part of this next young core as long as we can get this nerve to wake up in his forearm. Who knows what it's going to be, 1 week or 6 weeks. It's really unfortunate. So the only thing really from the Tigers is these 2 unfortunate injuries that are already putting a damper on the season, and we haven't even started opening day yet.
I'll probably start with Parker. Certainly something that I'm more concerned with, just because, yeah, like you said, it's kind of a little more of a fluky, a little more of a freak injury. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's anything that you could do to kind of rehab that, or make that nerve wake up faster. I have no idea. I don't even pretend to understand how the fucking human body works. But just thinking about Parker, and yeah, I'm hoping for a speedy recovery. Hopefully that nerve ends up coming through just fine. And then yeah, like the Matt Vierling one, probably a lot less worried about that. I mean, strained rotator cuff. It'd be one thing if he was, a starting pitcher or, a pitcher in the rotation, and that was his throwing arm. Is that would be, kind of a tough injury for a pitcher. But I mean, he's a third baseman, so obviously he still needs his throwing arm. But yeah, I'm not like super worried. It's a strain. Strains happen. They have a timeline for it. They know he's not going to be ready for opening day. But I mean, I don't see that like affecting him, too far into the season. But yeah, I mean, he's super important. You talked about it, Ty. But when you miss out on a guy like Alex Bregman, you still have a really good dude at third base. I mean, Matt Vierling, who's very much like just entering his prime right now, 27, maybe just turned 28, and had his best season to date. Yeah, batting .257, 16 dingers. Every year he has improved on his home run count. So I mean, I have no reason to think that he won't improve on it this year. Maybe hit 18, 19, maybe 20 dingers. So yeah, hoping for a speedy recovery for both Matty V and Parker.
Yep, that's it for the Tigers. Again, opening day is in, I believe, 30 days from today, 29 days from today, depending on when you're listening to this. As we already discussed, is on a Friday. So downtown will be absolutely buzzing. Hopefully the weather is beautiful. Usually it's on a Thursday. We all need to, act like we have the flu that next day on Friday at work. So now that it's on a Friday, we can actually enjoy it and hang out on Saturday down there. So let's jump over to the Red Wings.
Let's do it. Wings. Bit of a skid right now. They're on a 2-game skid. They actually dropped both their games to Columbus this past week, including the outdoor stadium series game that was played at the Horseshoe where Ohio State plays football. So really cool game. And I know that the viewership was way, way up. I think, I don't have the stats in front of me, but I was just looking at it on Twitter. I think it was an average of 1.6 million viewers, which was the most viewed hockey game since ESPN actually regained the rights to the NHL in 2021. So, I mean, the people were tuning in to view that game. I was able to watch maybe just the third period of it. I think it was just coming back from some travel. And yeah, I mean, I don't want to like bitch and moan too much about the refs, but I will in this case. Permission to bitch just a little bit. But I mean, just an absolutely atrocious no call on a high stick by Columbus that actually, immediately led to the game-winning goal late in the third period. So yeah, I mean, that was just an absolutely sick one, refs. And it was actually right after the Red Wings tied up the game, and then yeah, just to get scored on after just a blatant high sticking. The goal definitely shouldn't have counted. And they actually went and reviewed it, and somehow it still counted. And it's bad when the commentators are pretty flabbergasted. So that one sucked, but it happens. This is professional sports, and sometimes the refs just make mistakes. So you got to move on. You got to move past it. They have an opportunity to right the ship tonight. Unfortunately, it is late in the third period right now. The Wings are down 2-1 to the Hurricanes. They're at home. They were actually home dogs in this game. The Canes are pretty damn good, and the boys are down 2-1. And I think they actually did just give up a penalty, so they're on a penalty kill, which is not what you want to be when you're down 2-1 with 4 minutes left in the game. So we'll keep you guys updated as we record live. Maybe they can miraculously turn this around. Again, they're only down 1 goal, but they're kind of at the point where almost at the end of the game they got to pull that goalie. So we'll see how they do. A couple games coming up. They have the Utah Hockey Club at home on Thursday. If I'm correct, this is the first time that the Wings have ever played the Utah Hockey Club. Of course, they're an expansion team, so should be a win for the Wings, especially if they drop this one. They'll be on a 3-game skid, and they'll definitely need that win before the Red Wings actually have another huge game at the Capitals, the Washington Capitals, on Friday, before heading to Ottawa on Monday. So kind of two tough games, a very winnable game with the Utah Hockey Club coming to Detroit. So, I mean, you got to right the ship if you're the Red Wings. They're still one of the hottest teams in hockey, but they're kind of, skidding a little bit lately. Not something that I'm extremely worried about, but you got to win games. It's the home stretch.
I never claim to be, a puckhead. Hockey is definitely my weakest probably my weakest of all the sports, but I never remember that Utah Hockey Club is an actual thing. I know they're expansion team, they're new and stuff. Every time I read that, I'm like, oh shit, I forgot Utah's got a team and it's named that. So it's always so funny when we talk about that. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Horrendous. I was watching both games against Columbus. The no call was egregious. The reviewing of it and then still sticking with it. I haven't seen any sort of NHL, referee program or anything, any tweets or anything like that saying like, well, this is the reason why they actually didn't call it. I've just only seen people be like, what the fuck? This was a blatant missed call. So that's unfortunate. But, I will say we got absolutely pants the night before, that was at LCA, I believe, by the Blue Jackets. It was, I think it was like 1-1 or 1-0, 1-1. And then we looked down and looked back up and it was 5-0. And I know that game had a lot of weird goals. One of them was knocked down right in front of the crease and then barely got tipped in with a stick. And it was originally ruled not a goal because it was just thrown in, but then it was tipped. So a lot of weird things happened. But you can't get pants like that. And then in the next game, you come back and allow the rest to dictate the game like that. So they got to right the ship. Again, really needed this one against Carolina, even though, like you said, the Hurricanes are pretty elite this year. But they got to figure it out. If April and the D is going to hit as we want it to, they had to make the playoffs. And this little skid, they got to put an end to it. So, a really important next few games. Again, we talked about the Pistons. Important next few games for the home seeding. Not necessarily playoff implications for the Pistons, but definitely playoff implications for the Red Wings as the next 2 weeks come and go. So, got to get it done with the boys. And then the other thing I will say before we jump into some college hoops, we have the NHL trade deadline later this week. I'm not necessarily a puck head. I can try and bullshit my way through it and guys that the Red Wings should be targeting and if they'd be available, what it would take to get them and stuff. I do know that Stevie Y, who famously, if you want him to make a move, he's going to go the opposite way and just stick with his Stevie Y plan. I know he did come out and say he likes this team we have. He's betting on us, and he's telling the boys not to expect the cavalry to come at this trade deadline, which I think a lot of Red Wings fans were pretty upset to hear. So I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't need the cavalry, Stevie Y, but I think I do need another defenseman. I mean, they're thin and they've picked up a couple injuries, and I think if you have aspirations to make the playoffs or make a run in the playoffs, I mean, this team is good enough to make a run. But first and foremost, you got to get there, and I think there's holes in the defense. So yeah, I mean, no, I don't expect them to throw huge amounts of draft capital at getting 2, 3, 4 guys, whatever. But I think one defenseman isn't asking for too much. So Stevie Y, I mean, please, man, you gotta. We trust the Iser plan, but you got to give us something here.
So let's keep it moving. Let's move into college hoops. Had an enormous week or so of college hoops going back to when Michigan State played last week. Michigan State is on an absolute tear. After putting out the 2 goose eggs out on the West Coast, they were kind of coming home to an absolute monster of a 5-game streak. To the surprise of everyone, I think I saw something on Twitter about the odds that Michigan State was going to be was able to win all these games. They had a 1.3% chance to sweep all 5 of the past games, 1 in 75% chance. And they did it. They ended up winning all 5 games. They beat Wisconsin. Earlier, they beat Maryland, obviously, Michigan, Purdue, Illinois. We covered those ones, but their latest one against Wisconsin. Just absolute masterclass by Michigan State. Classic Tom Izzo to lose 2 random games in the middle of the season, have some people start freaking out, and then just come back and just slaughter the competition on his way to what hopefully might end up being a chance at a Big Ten title.
Yeah, and don't forget, too, of course, those West Coast games were horrendous, 2 bad losses there. And then what do they do? 2 games after that, at home, they lose to Indiana, and an Indiana team that is maybe a bubble team at best. And the Spartans just laid an egg. And we're kind of scratching our heads, what is this team made of? And then, yeah, to your point, they rip off 5 straight wins against at the time 5 straight ranked teams. I mean, I think Illinois has since dropped 5, but still, 4 of the 5 teams are still ranked right now: Purdue, Michigan, Maryland, and Wisconsin. And yeah, you rip off 5 straight, and those are huge wins. A couple of those being on the road too, with Michigan and Maryland, and I think that Illinois game might have been on the road as well. So yeah, just an enormous stretch. And I think we can break down the Wisconsin game just a little bit more, but I mean, just another, like you said, an Izzo masterclass in a game where, once again, Michigan State got off to a slow start, and I think you kind of blinked, and Wisconsin was up I think it was 12-3 or whatever that might be, and you're thinking how does this team start so slow every time? And then you blink, and you got guys like Cohen Carr who are just throwing down insane reverse alley-oop dunks. The crowd's back in it, Jaden Akins hits a couple threes, and then, just like that, the Spartans are winning. And it seemed like basically from then on, I know they were down at halftime, but they kind of, commanded the game, especially in the second half there. And it was another classic Tom Izzo March performance where, Michigan State was favored in that game. They were at home, you got the home crowd, but they really got the best of Wisconsin there. They played tremendous. And I have some stat lines in front of us right now. Akins, 19 points, 8 boards, and an assist. He was great from 3, 4 of 9. He wasn't great overall shooting, just 6 of 18, so not super efficient there. But then you got, guys like, Jace Richardson, who time and time again continues to step up, even though he's just a freshman. Very efficient, 11 points, 5 boards, 6 assists stat line, including 3 threes of his own. So continues to be one of MSU's best players. And then I think probably last thing for me, I'll throw it back to you, Ty, but our absolute dog, Jackson Kohler, who is really coming into his own this season. I know in previous seasons, he's battled some injuries. He's missed some games. Seemingly, he is not only, the healthiest that he's been in years, knock on wood, but also, he seems like he just has that dog in him just a little bit more than years past. 10 points and, way more importantly to me, 16 rebounds while also adding 2 assists. I mean, you don't win that game without a dog like Jackson just cleaning it up on, both the defensive rebounding but also offensive. I mean, it was awesome to see.
Yeah, you covered the Wisco game pretty great there. We're essentially one win away from at least a share of the Big Ten championship, and they're doing it by obviously not shooting the 3-ball well, but they are doing classic things like like you just mentioned, rebounding the ball so well that are getting a second chance points, getting out in transition, getting points in the paint. So they're doing it in classic Izzo ways. I don't know if it's sustainable when we get into March, not being able to shoot the 3-ball very well. Michigan State 3-point percentage is 347th, but the 3-point defense is 4th. So they're doing it in a very unique / old school way, but it seems to be working. So shout out the boys again, essentially likely one win away from at least a share of the Big Ten championship. And on the other side of the state, not to leave out our Michigan listener fans, Michigan had a little bit more of a rough the last 2 weeks. We don't need to go into much detail about stuff before last week, but they had the extension of Dusty May, and they are now essentially one Namari Burnett buzzer beater away from being 0 for 3 in that stretch since the Dusty May extension. They had that buzzer beater against the Rutgers, which was obviously a great shot. Rutgers is a borderline bubble team, but have NBA talent on that team, so shout out to them. Really lucky that went in again, so you're not 0-3 in the Dusty May extension period. But Namari Burnett had 20 points, Cheddar had 16, Danny Wolf had 10 in their latest game, their loss there. Or excuse me, that was in the Rutgers game. And they only had 5 shots beyond the arc for the third straight game, or excuse me, only made 5 shots for the third straight game. And so kind of similar to the Spartans in that they're not making 3-point shots, but the difference is Michigan State is limiting the opponent's 3-point shots and getting second chance opportunities. Michigan hasn't quite figured that out yet. I mean, I think they had senior night at home the other day and got absolutely stomped by Illinois. They were just crushed on the glass. Illinois kind of played a Michigan State-like game and just crashed the glass and really did a number on Michigan at Chrysler Arena. Vlad had 22 points for Michigan, but their other 4 starters had just a combined 28 points. So Vlad almost had more than the rest of the entire starting group. So Michigan floundering a little bit. They were firmly kind of in the driver's seat with Michigan State for the Big Ten championship. They are now struggling, kind of holding its last breath for a share of the Big Ten championship. So really important next few games for Michigan there to try and get some semblance of a Big Ten championship or whatnot. Obviously, both are firmly into March. Michigan probably falling to a 3, maybe a 4 seed. Michigan State looking to stay at a 2 seed, maybe even move up a little bit. But really important last 2 weeks for Big Ten basketball.
Yeah, let's look at the last week of Big Ten basketball. Of course, not including the tournament. Michigan last 2 games. Maryland at home on Wednesday tomorrow, or I guess today when this podcast is out, and then of course at MSU, and then Michigan State's last 2 games at Iowa on Thursday, and then senior night at the Breslin on Sunday against Michigan. I think that is a 12 p.m. tip off there. So yeah, you mentioned it, Ty, but Michigan State can clinch at least a share of the Big Ten championship with one more win. If they win at Iowa, they will be Big Ten champions. And then, it's just going to depend on Michigan's game against Maryland. If they drop that, then, of course, it makes it essentially Michigan State has already clinched at least a share. But, of course, if they win, then it potentially could come down to Sunday's game if, Michigan State is going to share the championship or potentially have it outright, or potentially if they lose to Iowa, who knows what's going to happen, right? That could be Michigan that kind of controls that destiny a little bit more. So it's gonna be cool to see. I think if you're Michigan State, you're not really looking at anything that anyone else is doing. You control your own destiny. You're going to mow your own lawn, and that really starts at Iowa, which is always a tough environment. I think Iowa probably has more of a down year this year, but I mean, take care of business, and you're Big Ten champs.
Let's keep it at the collegiate state. We'll get this moving. We just have one more thing to touch on. You got some college hockey stuff?
Yeah, a little bit of college hockey. Not to toot the own horns of the boys in green and white, but MSU hockey. They are your back-to-back Big Ten champs. So I mean, we gotta give them their flowers there. Another really tremendous season, a season where they've been ranked in seemingly in the top 5 the entire season. A lot of they were the number 1 or number 2 ranked team in the country for a lot of the season. So I just wanted to give them a quick shout out and a quick shout out to Isaac Howard. One of Michigan State's best players. He is your Big Ten scoring champion for the year 2024, 33 points in 24 games. And he's just the second Spartan to ever capture the league crown. Of course, Big Ten hockey has actually not been around for that long, but still, second Spartan to ever do it. So that's huge. Just looking at a couple of the games coming up for the Spartans. So the Big Ten tournament, the Spartans have a bye week, of course, as the number 1 seed, your Big Ten champs, and they actually play the winner of Michigan and Penn State. So that's going to be the first round of that tournament is this weekend. The winner is going to play Michigan State on, I believe it is March 15th. So a week from Saturday, I think that would be. Just my opinion, no matter what happens in the tournament, I do believe that the Spartans are going to be a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. And I'm pumped. I'm really pumped to see, potentially another Frozen Four run. We really haven't seen it since that 2007 season, the Justin Ablocator and Duncan Keith season. That was, pretty magical and ended up with a championship for the Spartans. So, would love to see another natty come back to East Lansing.
Yeah, shout out Justin Ablocator, shout out Duncan Keith, shout out Adam Nightingale for bringing this team back to relevance. So that's it for college hockey. That essentially wraps up all of the different encompassing sports and teams that we had to touch on. New record on the Gridiron Report for different teams and sports to discuss. Let's get into our final segment, just the grit of the weeks. You want to go ahead and kick us off here?
Yeah, I'll kick us off, man. And I don't want to be, cheating too much and looking through our show notes, but I do believe we have the same guy for grid of the week. It's happened before. I think we've had the same grid of the week a couple times. I know sometimes we want to just kind of be contrarian to each other, but in this case, when you have 16 boards in a college basketball game, you're winning grit of the week, damn it. And that is none other than Jackson Kohler. I mean, we talked about it already, but just a really tremendous and really gritty effort by Jackson Kohler. Rebounding is majority effort. I mean, obviously some of it's God-given talent. It's, the height obviously plays a factor, but a lot of it is, I'm just going to outwork and I'm going to out-hustle you and I'm going to get this rebound over you because I'm just physically a harder worker. And that's really what I saw from Jackson Kohler on Sunday afternoon. It was incredible to see. I mean, rebounding just embodies grit. So yeah, I'm happy that we both have him as grit of the week.
Like we said, this team is not blowing the doors off teams with hot shooting and, just over-skilling teams. Like you said, we're out-rebounding teams and just basically hustling to the ball, doing the gritty work, and Jackson Kohler is at the forefront of that. He is leading our team in rebounds per game, 7.9. He's also shooting a 3-ball at 30.2%. He had a few games ago where he was just letting it rain from 3, really kind of changing up how games are being run. He is, I believe, 6th in the Big Ten rebound-wise, again with 7.9. So yeah, he's just doing the dirty. I don't think we don't win the game that we had the other day if he is not crashing the boards like he was. So shout out to Jackson Kohler. He's my grit of the week as well. Very, very deserving of it. Obviously, Jackson, feel free to come on the podcast, talk about your rebounding, the effort you put in, and accept your award. And I actually have a surprise grit of the week. This is not on our show notes. So before we wrap up the show, my last grit of the week, again, I know I catch some flack for giving out too many grits of the week. This one is pretty important. I actually have a listener voicemail to show my grit of the week. So let's take a listen to that right now.
Hey, just calling to let you know the Lafayette Coney Island has reopened again. I knew that'd make you guys happy.
So that's my grit of the week, my other grit of the week. Lafayette, Coney Island, the owners of Lafayette. Obviously, we are big-time Lafayette, Coney Island boys. We are not American Coney Island boys. We are Lafayette. They are open again. They were working hand in hand with the health inspector. They had nothing to hide. They were working to get those Conies back out to the people. They have opened their doors once again, hopefully for the entirety of their future. Hopefully we don't have to go through this again. Lafayette, Coney Island, back open. They're my other grit of the week.
Hell yes. Mr. Health Inspector, please open these doors. That's awesome to hear. I'm fired up. I mean, you really just can't keep down just a great establishment, a great Coney establishment like Lafayette. This is really tremendous, and I think my night is made.
And perfect timing. I mean, as we're getting into opening day, and look, we're talking about some potential Detroit Pistons playoff games. The weather's starting to turn up here. We're going to be going downtown, going to the Tigers game, going to Pistons game, stopping at Lafayette, Coney Island, having a Coney dog or 4, getting a can of beer, squeezed in there with the million other people that are there. I'm fired up. When I heard that this was going on today, it's reopened. Shout out to Jackson Kohler and shout out to Lafayette, Coney Island. We're all the way back. But that is it for our show. Thank you guys for tuning into this week's episode. You can find Kyle on Twitter at Kyle_Marino. You can find me on Twitter at Dutton_Tyler, and both at Piston Powered and Champaign Athletics. Join the conversation next week by calling into the Gridiron Report voicemail for us to play and discuss on the podcast. That number is 313-306-7939. And if you like this episode, please take a moment to rate it 5 stars and leave us a review. It means the world to us.
Thanks, y'all. We appreciate y'all more than you know. And restore that roar.
Yeah. Every highlight's a journey, roads paved with fire, sweat, tears, and hustle that never expire. From the rookies on the rise to the old hands retire. Grit Iron is the place for fans to conspire. Hustle on blast, beats thunder and loud. Champions are born from the roar of the crowd. The Gridiron Report, where the stories are proud. Tune in, bring the heat, make your fandom a vow.